I've paid thousands of dollars in courses to learn what you're basically teaching on your podcast for free. What you're putting out there is so valuable. So, I just really want to acknowledge you, and I definitely send everyone to your podcast.
You were virtually one of the first mentors that I looked up to and started following. You're always one step ahead of the game. So I just wanted to give you kudos and props for that, because lots of people are watching, lots of people are learning from it.
Tucker and the whole TTM crew, Dan and Chris, thanks so much for your support. I love what you guys do, and a huge fan. Having this support's huge. So I'm grateful for that.
What's up, everybody out there in listener land? This is episode 270 of the Real Dealz podcast. And you know who I am. I'm your host, Tucker Merrihew. I want to thank you guys for joining me for what is an awesome episode. Now, before we get into all of that, I want to thank you guys that reached out to me. I had a number of you that said you enjoyed last week's show. It was kind of off the cuff. I didn't know whether or not I was really going to do one. I thought it was a good topic, kind of talking about fear and just kind of how that can hold people back, and really how I deal with it in my own life as well, how I try and compartmentalize it, and ultimately just how I try and move past it so that I can move the puck forward in my business. But like I said, I had a number of you guys reach out to me and said it really resonated with you, so I'm glad I can keep putting out content on a solo level that connects with you guys and gives you a little insight into what we're all experiencing to some extent, and hopefully how to overcome it. Now, this week, if last week's show was any indicator of fear, this week might make you pucker a little bit when we start talking numbers and size of projects. I've got an awesome individual on, Mr. Augie, who is a lot of things, we'll say, right? He's a whole lot of things, and he's not only one of the most highest producing, I should say the highest producing, one of the highest producing loan officers in the entire country for residential real estate, but he also builds multi-million-dollar spec homes and multifamily projects that have huge valuations. Hence the title of this week's show. And I've been trying to get Augie on the show for a while now. I met him at the Big Badass Real Estate Wealth Expo that Charles put on a couple of months ago. And I'd heard his name a number of times before that, but we were finally able to connect. And I said, hey, man, I'd love to have you on the show. And he said, hey, man, I'd love to do the show. So I said, well, let's do it then. So we did the show, and the episode was fantastic, or the interview was fantastic, which you guys will hear in just a minute. But he talks, basically, you guys just get to be a fly on the wall where we talk about his model of earned income versus passive income versus depreciation, which is basically loan commission income, single family building income, and then multifamily income, and how he gets that in a variety of different ways, both selling out projects and also through cash flow, and then of course all of the wonderful depreciation that you get when you have multifamily projects, and how that offsets the amount of taxable income that you have at the end of any given year. So great show. Just really in the nitty gritty. We're in the trenches this week. We're talking all about just kind of what it takes to build multifamily projects, the numbers. We break down the numbers, right? No fluff this week. We're in the trenches. We're talking numbers. We're talking nitty gritty. I get all the important stuff out of him. So grab a pen, grab a piece of paper, or put this thing on repeat, because you guys are going to get a ton of value out of this week's show. Now, before we get into all of that, a few things that I like to mention. Number one is our housekeeping items. For those of you guys that I talked to about our REI Deal Generator program, I may have put this out last week, but it's filled. We filled it. So round 3 for this quarter is, just round 3 overall is full. We have 6 great individuals, and I'm looking forward to working with each and every one of them to explode their business. Now, if you did not get into this, this time around for whatever reason, or timing wasn't right, or the investment just, you weren't at a point to make the investment needed, don't worry, we have our Deal Finders Academy, which is a great place for all of you guys that maybe didn't get into the Deal Generator program or just didn't want to make the investment. You guys can come join our Deal Finders Academy, and you can hang out with some of the best investors from across the country virtually every single day. You can ask questions, you can rub virtual elbows, and you can follow along with what I'm doing in our real estate investing business here every day. I try and post every single day on deals we're working, things we're doing, and just try and pull back the curtain. But more importantly, you have access to myself, my entire team, and everybody else in the group on an ongoing basis to kind of get feedback, support, questions, and really just be a part of a group, right? This can be kind of a lone wolf business, and so it's great to have partners and people that you can talk to that don't take half your money. So reach out to us. We'd love to see if we can fit you into our Deal Finders Academy, and Dan would love to have a chat with you. He'll put a link in the show notes. We have a new page that explains everything that it is, and then you can just book a call with Dan. And at that point, he can hop on and talk with you, and hopefully it's a good fit, and we can put you in whatever market it is that you're located. Now, other than that, our Driving for Dollars app, for those of you guys that are using it, thank you. If you're not, make sure that you go download it. It's in the Google Play and iTunes store. We've got a couple new tiers coming out that I mentioned in last week's show, but more importantly, go use the app, folks. The basic version is only $20 a month, and you can skip trace on the fly. You can build lists. You can track people down, and you can say, hey, you want to sell your property, because at the end of the day, that is what the game that we're in is, finding people and asking them if they want to sell their property. So make sure that you go download it. Again, it's the Driving for Dollars app. It's the blue logo. You can't miss it because it's trademarked. Now, other than that, what's going on with me and TTM over the course of the past week? Well, one announcement that I wanted to let you guys know about is that we've started a new Instagram page that's called TTM Home Design. And so if you guys want to go to Instagram and you want to follow TTM Home Design, I don't run the page. My wife Joni does. And for those of you guys that know me and know a little bit more about my business, or our business, I should say, I don't do a lot of the design work. Now, I oversee it, and I say, looks great, and, let's do it. But the masterminding behind all of the design that we do, which is amazing design, is her. And so we're starting a new Instagram page. It's called TTM Home Design. You can go follow us, and she posts all of our design stuff on previous projects, new projects, ideas, and all the stuff that we're doing. So for those of you guys that value design and you're trying to do it a little more in your projects right now, I highly encourage you to go follow us on Instagram, and you can see what we got going on, and hopefully it can spur some good ideas for all of you out there that are looking for good design ideas in the projects that you got going on. Now, other than that, we were bombarded with leads this past week. I probably mentioned it. We had a number of leads that came through, and we got, 2 new houses under contract, and we're working on a variety of others, but they're great deals, I have to say. Most of them came from realtor marketing that we've been doing. We've been talking to a lot of realtors, we've been networking, and we've been layering that on top of all of our direct to seller stuff. And we put one under contract actually yesterday, which was really cool. It was an estate sale deal where a realtor stopped by the estate sale, said, hey, do you want to sell your house? Looks like you're having an estate sale. The woman said yes, and so the realtor gave me a call, and we met with the gal yesterday morning. We signed everything, got under contract. Gal was a little squirrely. She said she wanted cash before she signed anything, and I had to explain to her that's not really how it works. But we walked her off the ledge. We got her to sign the paperwork, and it's going to be a great little project. It's in West Lynn, great area. Actually, one of the an area of West Lynn that I used to hang out in and do all kinds of things as my younger riffraff version. Doing things that you shouldn't do, but little walk down memory lane. But it's a great area now. It's really matured. The price points have come up, and it's a great family area, and so it's going to sell really quickly. We got another one under contract that is in the northeast area, which we might actually wholesale that one. So if you guys are out there in listener land, you're in the Portland area, you're looking for a wholesale deal, it's a double-level ranch, and it should be probably, a lighter rehab, and it should sell somewhere, mid-5, something like that. So if you're interested, we may actually wholesale that one just because it's a little farther for me to drive. But we don't know. Maybe we won't. Maybe we will. But you can reach out to us, and we'll let you know. But bottom line is we've had a lot of leads come in as of late. It's holiday week for me. I'm heading out to Bend here tomorrow, day after tomorrow. I'm going to go stay at Pronghorn, for those of you guys that are familiar with the Bend area. And I'm going to go do some golfing, some hanging out, some adult beveraging, and going to call it a short week. So a little bit of an abbreviated work week for me, but we got a lot that we're cramming in. We got inspection periods on stuff. We got houses under contract. We got podcasts we're recording. We got all kinds of stuff going on, but that's just another week in the life of what's going on with me and TTM. So without further ado, let's get into the rest of the show, and let's talk multifamily millions with my man, Mr. Augie. All right, Real Deals podcast listeners, I want to talk quickly about our show's sponsor, Iron Bridge Lending. If you guys have not reached out to Iron Bridge already to talk to them about funding some of your upcoming flip projects, I highly encourage you to do so. I've known the owner of Iron Bridge for a very long time. I personally borrowed millions of dollars from them over the years to do a number of different projects, and I can say without a doubt, they are the best hard money lending company I have ever come across, and that is the reason why they are the sole sponsor of this show. I've had a lot of other companies reach out to me and want to sponsor this show, but I just won't do it. I feel like I need to be genuine in who we have sponsoring the show, and it needs to be somebody that I've personally done a ton of business with. So I personally vouch for their ability to be the best, hands down, in the world of hard money lending. You won't find better programs, you won't find better terms, and they're lending or will be lending in over 20 states. So chances are, if you're hearing this in whatever state you're in, it's definitely worth it to check out their website, reach out to them, see if they're lending in your state, and if they are, I would absolutely encourage you to do business with them. Another very cool thing to note is that they have a program for most rehabs where you can actually borrow up to 90% of the purchase price. Now, this is given the fact that you are actually buying a deal, which if you're listening to the show, that means you probably are. But if you have an actual deal on the table, they'll fund up to 90% of your purchase price, and they'll even give you rehab funds on top of that, which means that it only takes 10% down to get into a project, which is unbelievable in the hard money world. So do yourself a favor, reach out to Iron Bridge Lending, have a conversation with them, see if they're a good fit for you and for your next project. I can guarantee you that you'll be happy that you did. All right, everybody out there in listener land, I have a special guest interview for you guys this week. I have an individual that I met up at the PNW Big Badass Wealth Expo this past time around. And we chatted briefly, and I thought, you know what, I got to have this guy on the show because he's just got a lot going on. So without further ado, I want to introduce you guys to the owner of Seattle Luxury Homes, the branch manager of Bay Equity Seattle, and the owner of BK Investment Group, which is a whole lot of stuff going on. What's up, Augie?
Hey, how's it going, Tucker? Thanks for having me on the show, and I'm excited to talk a little bit more about what we do here.
Yeah, I'm curious. There's a lot of stuff in your Facebook profile, so maybe break that down and kind of clarify for me like how it all fits together, and then we can dive into the cool multifamily stuff that I know we're going to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So, starting off in my career, I had a finance degree from Washington State University. And basically, I really wanted to get into, investments via private money fund or investment banking, something like that. But, like a lot of people, I didn't do too good in school. So I ended up, getting a fallback career that was mortgage. And through mortgage, I saw a lot of opportunity in real estate. And so I could do my investing in real estate. And I didn't need to have the fancy background or degree to do it. So
what was, just out of curiosity, what was your not so good grades?
Oh man, I was like a 2.84 GPA,
Okay, well, that's not bad. I ask because my first semester in college, I tried to play lacrosse and party and occasionally go to school, and I ended up with a 1.5, and it's hard to dig out of a 1.5 over time. So I think I ended with a 2.1 overall GPA when I graduated.
That's too funny, man. You actually beat me in semester one.
Okay, so you had a culture shock semester one as well, it sounds like. So
Yeah. Pullman's a pretty fun city. I highly recommend it for anyone who actually likes to have a good time.
Yes, the first years of college. Anyway, I digress. So you got into the mortgage game, sounds like, because of course they were hiring anybody, right?
Yeah, I mean, basically you have a pulse, you got a friend that's got a mortgage, let's hire you, we'll refinance your friends, we'll get your family on board, and then if you burn out, you're done. So hopped right into mortgage brokering, and even for that first 2 years, I was like, I don't really want to be in mortgage. The people who I saw around me in real estate and mortgage, they're all pretty depressed because I had graduated in 2008, so the market crash was happening around us. And I was like, all right, I'll just go back into investments 2 years down the road. And then I just got more and more excited about real estate as I was in mortgage, and ended up, starting my own branch 2 years into the business, and really decided to take that to the next level. Just fast forward, I've been in the top 1% of mortgage originators in America for 2 years out of the last three. This year, I'm on pace to be there again. And that's been a very successful business and taught me a lot about how to structure debt and how to do investing pretty conservative with long-term fixed debt, securing most of our development plays, but also how to leverage to maximize return. So going back in 2013, I had saved enough money to really get started in the investing side of the business. And so I decided to jump right into townhouse development in Seattle. And that was when I created BK Investment Group, which
why townhouses? Just out of curiosity, you just wanted to fast forward through the single family thing, or
yeah, so flips didn't really excite me when I was coming out of the when I was financing people coming out of the downturn. The people who had the most wealth, most property that I saw were builders. And so I instantly clicked. I was like, I want to do that. I want to build properties. I want to have, lots of apartments. I want to have multifamily rentals. And the only reason why we even popped into the townhouse play was because I really didn't know what I was doing yet, right? It was our very first deal. And there was a property that was just so cheap. It had been on the market for a year at like $82,000. And it was already subdivided and developed for 2 townhomes. And I just knew it had to be a deal to like my core. I was like, I'm going to make money on this. So I randomly was introduced to a builder. Me and that builder are still partners today. We founded BK Investment Group. And we completed that townhouse project. And because our goal was to keep property and not sell it, we actually just kept it as it was. And so our investment philosophy was really, we want as much cash flow as possible, because over the next 10 years, we basically want to not have to work unless we're doing a really fun project that we want to build. So we hopped right into that townhouse project, built it. Total project cost was something like $350,000. And I think it was worth like $700,000 when it was done. So we, basically doubled our project value. I think we only put like $100,000 into the whole thing. So made 300% return or something on our first project. And from there, it really spiraled into, okay, we need to start doing bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger multifamily as quickly as possible. Basically scale up while the market was down and recovering.
So when you did that project, just out of curiosity, so did you plat them as individual lots then and just kept them? Or did you just do townhome style like apartments?
So, one of the things that's really important when we look at any development play, and this as a builder, is the time to get permits and the time to complete your project takes a long time. And so we want to make sure we have multiple exit strategies. So in this particular case, the property was already short platted, but even if it wasn't, we still would have moved forward with that process, because an exit strategy would be selling each individual townhome as its own unit. And so we would pay that extra cost of short plat to make sure that we had the ability to have that exit strategy.
Gotcha. 'Cause I hear short plats go significantly faster up there in Seattle. I don't know if that's true or not, but is that the case?
Yeah, I believe it's called a unit lot subdivision. And so you just create the unit lots, and then that also helps you get around some of the setbacks and requirements for where the houses can be.
Gotcha. Because down here it's probably a year to do even a simple 2-lot partition. They say it's less, but with red lines and surveys and waiting on county, I mean, you end up being like a year. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, in Seattle has been pretty difficult. Prior to the new upzone and most of the multifamily up here, you had to do design review if you had any over 3 units, and most townhouse projects were 4 units or bigger. Mm-hmm. And that design review process would easily add on an additional 6 months just for the city to tell you that your townhouses look like every other townhouse built, and you're good to go. So that was pretty painful. They did just reduce the design review requirement on anything less than 8,000 square feet. So we've been really happy with that. And the process takes like a year though in Seattle. I mean, it's brutal. And then for the multifamily stuff, we pencil in typically 2 years to get a multifamily permitted.
Gotcha. So from contract to picking up the permit, start breaking ground, you got 2 years of paper pushing in between.
Correct. So as we build out that multifamily pipeline, we really have to make sure we have at any given time 3 to 4 multifamily developments in play. If one gets held up for any particular reason, maybe another one will get permitted, and then we can stagger them out to make sure that we have multifamily kind of being built every year.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, multifamily is kind of, in some regards, a lot like new construction. You can kind of build out that pipeline. It takes a little longer from, contract to shovel in the ground, but it's still the same philosophy.
Yeah. And that's, again, it's so we do both. We started a residential home construction business, and that is Seattle Luxury Homes. And like you, we kind of focus on that higher end. In Seattle, the price points may be 1.5 to 2.5 million. And, those projects we use as infill. So if we're doing apartment project and we have about a 6-month gap or a year gap between breaking ground on a new apartment project, it's nice to kind of do like a single family house because those are a little bit easier to push through.
Gotcha. So what I'm gathering here, just real quick, just overall business model, you got your loan income, right? That's like, we'll call it weekly cash flow, right?
Yes.
And then you've got your single family income, which is, we'll call it 6-month income. And then you've got your potential multifamily income or passive income, and that's like 2-year income.
Yeah, absolutely. And we focus mainly on that. We don't have any investors. We're all self-funded. And so we look at that as our retirement fund.
Gotcha. And that's, we'll get into that here in a second, but I'll just keep going. So basically then you've got a partner that you're doing both the single families with and the multifamily, same partner?
Correct.
Okay. Gotcha.
And the other thing is, the big difference between single family and multifamily that you realize very quickly is scale and capital requirements. So when we're building, a 1.5, let's say we have a $1.5 million construction budget, we're typically only putting in about 15 to 20% of that. So worst case scenario, we're putting in $300,000. Best case scenario, we're putting in $225,000. And if you've saved up enough money and if you're in development, most likely you have around $250,000. If there's people out there doing it with less than that, I commend you. That's amazing, and I hope you're having a lot of success. But on this bigger scale, you definitely need at least that much. As we stair step up into that multifamily game, at least here in Seattle, you're doing 15 to 20% of more like 3.6 to 4 million. And so that capital requirement goes up to, $500,000 to $600,000 per project. So, it's really important that you have multiple channels to create capital so you can do those bigger multifamily projects.
Yeah, that's I guess that separates the men from the boys a little bit, right?
Yeah. When you're dropping $500K of your own hard work dollars onto an apartment project, you better make sure that apartment's going to work out.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So you did that first deal. It worked out. Where did it go from there? And then maybe we'll get up to speed on where you're at today and what's been going on multifamily wise.
Yeah, man. So, just kind of like that last thing we talked about. So, we had this little duplex, it's 2 townhouses that we're renting. We had $350,000 in equity. We're cash flowing $750 a month. We have $0 invested. We did, 30-year fixed cash out refis on those and took out all of our capital. So we have $0 invested. We actually, over that first year period, had acquired a triplex and a piece of land. The triplex we converted into a 4-unit, was, zero down financing, pulled it out, cash flowed. A piece of land we developed into a 34-unit mixed use building, which we sold for more capital. And kind of as we built these projects and pulled out our capital, we just kept raising and doing bigger projects. Then we built our first 8-unit apartment building in North Seattle. And that was a really good, fun learning experience. We got to learn all the differences between multifamily construction and single-family construction, which there is a lot.
What are some of the biggest takeaways? I know we sat and we were chatting about some of them at dinner at the event, but what were some of the things? Because you were talking about like crazy stuff that most people don't ever think about, but like stairs on the inside versus the outside and just all kinds of stuff that really change your cost.
Oh yeah. So when you're designing your apartment building, you really got to make sure you're planning all the details and cost. If you are a contractor going from single family to multifamily, and we're gonna for this conversation, we'll assume multifamily has anything over 4 units. So when you go into that larger apartment space, there's going to be depending on your building sprinkler requirements. There's going to be fire requirements. For instance, if you have in Seattle more than 4 units per floor, you're required to have 2 staircases. So that might change what kind of unit type you put per floor, or what kind of building structure you build. Additionally, if you have a staircase that is enclosed, you need to have a pressurized stair system. That's going to be an added expense. A sprinkler system is very expensive with one staircase. You have a stacked sprinkler system. Your alarm system, your power hookup, just everything is like on steroids in multifamily. So, the example would be like we built that first project, that townhouse project we built for around in Seattle, about $115 per square foot. Keep in mind, it was back in 2000.
I was going to say that's pretty cheap.
That was back in like 2013, right? I mean, they're double now. So, and then, 2 years later, when we built that 8-unit apartment complex, it was roughly, $185 a square foot. So it was about a $70 per square foot spread. Some of that was accounted by market shifting, but certainly some of that added cost was design and switching to that multifamily sphere.
Gotcha. So what, just out of my own personal desires here to understand, what's the difference in cost? Let's say you're doing like a 6 to 8 unit, right? Pretty simple little building on a smaller infill lot versus, let's say you go more at scale and you're doing like a 15 to 25 unit. Is there much difference in the cost per foot on building those that you've found today in today's economy and today's costs?
Yeah. So, one thing is that, the price of land is so expensive now, even down there in Portland, where in order for, much of the land to make sense, it has to be fully maximized. And so, we have looked at lots where we could possibly do like maybe, let's say 2 fourplexes instead of doing, a 20-unit apartment. And you can cut down on some of those costs, but you still might be pushed into the sprinkler requirements. You still might have some additional fire rating issues. And then any lots that we're finding in the Seattle market, just based on how our zoning works, typically it wouldn't make sense to do a standard fourplex versus, a 20-unit, 30-unit, or 40-unit building.
Right. You've got to maximize your units in order to make it pencil, essentially.
Correct. And what you'll find is currently with the current valuations of land, there wasn't really much to buy in 2018, to be honest. We didn't buy one multifamily development opportunity. And, it's really just telling because rents kind of hit a stagnant plateau and kind of in 2017. And then they've been pretty steady this year, at least in our experience. And, so I think people were factoring in future rents. They were factoring in really high rents when trying to sell this land. And so land in 2018 was like, just way too expensive to make anything pencil for multifamily. And what's crazy is when you're building 20 units, a difference of $50 per month in rent could be the make or break of whether or not it's a deal.
Yeah, I mean, that's thin line, right? I mean, you're making a decision off of $50 one way or the other for, let's call it 15, 20 units, whatever. It could very easily swing one way or the other.
Yeah. And I mean, just using like a 5% cap rate, which is kind of the going cap rate in Seattle. If it was a 20-unit property, you take 20 units times that $50 per month times 12 months in a year, you're going to back out your vacancy and back out your expense ratio. And using that 5% cap rate, that $50 cost you $160,000 of profit. So,
crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy. But the one thing that I want to give everybody here is, when you're looking at building a house, it's, very subjective, right? So you're out there, you're looking at the market, you're saying, okay, I can build this house to this spec level and people should pay X. right? And we have to kind of take that gamble, and then where's the market, and is there enough profit to make sure that I don't lose if it's a little bit less, right? And that's a little bit subjective. The nice thing about multifamily is it's straight up numbers. If you understand what the cap rate is and what the rent is, you can create your return, and you only do a project if you hit your return metrics. So there's not as much rhyme or reason about whether you're going to sell for a certain price.
Yeah, well, here's a question for you then, because you saw rents kind of plateau, we'll call it, and maybe even compress in spots based on inventory and a number of renters in the Seattle area. Are you seeing cap rates adjust in terms of valuing a finished product for stuff that's in process with you? Or are you underwriting based on worst case scenario cap rate in order to move forward with stuff right now?
Yeah, so right now, when we saw that market shift, and one of the nice things about being a smaller company is you can be really nimble and quick. But one of the things that we did is when we saw the market shifting in 2017 is we started liquidating a lot of our portfolio. And so we actually liquidated our 8-unit apartment complex, and then we liquidated our 34-unit development site. And we had a 96-unit development site in University of Washington. We liquidated all of that stuff over the last year and a half. And the reason why we did that is because when we underwrote those transactions, we were a little bit younger. Again, that cycle takes 2 to 3 years, right? And so we were a little bit younger. Market was a little bit different. We had used, 5.25% cap rates, which were conservative at that time. But also we were using rents and from that time period, and we would update those annually as we move through that process. And now that we've liquidated that, we're using much more conservative cap rates. So we're using for our new construction, we're assuming a sale at 5.5% cap. A half of a percent difference in cap rate can be significant. As just another example, if you had $100,000 net operating income, that means your income after all the expenses associated with maintaining a property, at a 5% cap, that property is worth $2 million. Now, if we adjust that same $100,000 by a 5.5% cap, that property is only worth $1.81 million. So you've lost about $180,000 of profit. And if you think about that, that is approximately 10%, which is you're not having a bigger margin than like 30% on these deals. So you're losing a large percentage of your gain, and that's before backing out sales expense.
Right. Yeah, which obviously you got to factor in as well. So that sounds like then, 30% margin is pretty good. I would say, what do you think the average builder for single family in Seattle is shooting for on, the price points that you guys go after per project?
I think that most people are, based on what I've seen, are kind of targeting for single family the same thing that we're looking at, which is if we can get a piece of property for $500,000 in a neighborhood that supports $1.5 million, is we'll do $500,000 purchase acquisition, $500,000 build, $1.5 million sale. So it's about thirds, 1/3 land, 1/3 project cost, 1/3 profit.
Okay. Yeah, you guys have a pretty nice market for that. You can build less square footage and get that 1.5. See, our challenge is, we've got one right now. I take that back. We're buying for $550. It's basically going to be a new build. We'll probably new build for around $4, and it'll probably be worth $135, something like that. $350 on the build, let's call it, because it's a rebuild. But to get a third, it's hard here because we've got to build more square footage, which then bumps up. So that 500 turns into 650 build costs, right? And then that end product is still worth 1.5. So it's a little more challenging. It's almost a little more compressed here, even though maybe we're not quite as competitive because we have to build more square footage in order to get that price point.
Yeah, I mean, whether you're doing single family construction or multifamily construction, the fact of the matter is construction costs are high. So like you and I are still getting roughly the same building costs, as far as material. You guys might have a little bit more flexibility in labor or some things that are produced down there in Oregon, but costs are just high, right? Financing costs are a little bit higher. All of that's a little bit higher. So it definitely behooves everybody to do construction where prices are really high or rents are really high, right? So I'm not saying go out and build the most luxurious product you can, because there's definitely some weakness in that market, but build a very high-end product for your location, and maybe your location's next door to one of the best neighborhoods, but it's not the best neighborhood, right? And what you'll see is you'll get some of that trickle down from those nicer neighborhoods. Is you'll see people who look at your building and they say, that's pretty close to where I want to be. It's nicer than my building, but the rent's a little cheaper, so I like it, and I'll go there. Same thing with the housing, right? It's not quite the best neighborhood. Like, we're not over in the Pearl District down there in Portland, but we're a little bit further north, right? And you might still get a similar price, but you get the land for cheaper.
What's funny is the Pearl District used to be ghetto.
Oh, yeah.
It was my grandfather had a business down there, and I remember going down there as a kid. And it was like bum central, and it was sketchy. Like, they didn't want me walking out on the street by myself.
Is there a part of Portland that's not bum central anymore?
Well, this was back in the day, bum central, right? We're not talking present day where it's like everywhere. Back then, it was like the bums were really sketchy, right? Like, they were, you didn't know if they were gonna shank you or rob you or whatever. Right now, it's just they become part of yard art.
Yeah. You just step over them on your way downtown.
Yeah, watch out for that needle. Watch out for that tent. Watch out, So.
Yeah, no, I love it down there, man. It's like my city away from home.
So at this point, then, what's your focus? I mean, I want to go over a big success story, but what's your focus now moving forward? What's your feeling on the market? Are you being conservative? Are you looking to do more single family, given kind of where the multifamily market is right now? What's your focus going forward?
I'm going to say something very unpopular. I think that there's going to be a really tough time for some of the single family builders here over the next 12. Just because I feel like land prices haven't really caught up with where the market is. And I'm starting to see a lot of stagnant listings in Seattle. I'm not familiar, with Portland, but I've seen lots of stagnant inventory of really nice houses that even a year ago probably would have gone for 150 to 200,000 more than they are going for today. And that's a pretty big drop. And I think that buyers are being a little bit more conservative. I'm saying this from my experience in the mortgage business. I think that buyers are being a little bit more conservative on price as well. They're kind of freaked out that the market's not where it was. I'm seeing a lot more clients back out of transactions and go find alternatives. And so, I'm a little bit concerned about that. And then the second reason why I'm concerned about single family is I thought that with interest rates below 4%, we would see a lot more buying activity. Certainly that's a big catalyst for lots of purchasing. And I personally have not seen it as hot. I've seen refis really pick up, so a lot of mortgage people are really excited about that. But I feel like the purchase business hasn't really boomed from interest rates being low, and that concerns me as a home builder as well.
Gotcha. Yeah, you're kind of on the front edge. Like, you're the guy that they take the surveys from to see what's really going on the front edge. So it's interesting to hear you see that.
Exactly. And it's kind of like I tell everybody, because, all my friends know I'm in real estate. So the first question is like, what do you think about the market? I'm like, anything you hear in the news is 2 months behind. And so, I think that we have a very steady market. I just think that anybody who out there is doing spec like we are should focus on, really good land acquisition, whether that's subdividing a lot or, getting really cheap individual lot. Just be a little bit more conservative there. And then what we're seeing sell quickly is kind of stuff that is priced really well, but also like at the upper end. So like not a generic spec home. In Seattle, there's a lot of that 3,000 square foot, generic new construction, that they try to sell for, 1.5 million. And what we would see is now that 1.5 million price is still good, but the people who are selling are builders who are putting in the extra features, making it very feature rich and very design oriented. For the multifamily space, we are being a little bit more conservative, but if people aren't out buying, that means that there will be plenty of renters, and people are continuing to move to our area. I still think people are probably continuing to move to Portland as well, and we've adjusted our criteria to basically look at, if we're going to buy a project, our exit price is going to be, 5.5 to 6 cap, and we'll run it at both and say, if we can still hit our profit metrics at 6%, if we can still pull 100% of our cash out of the transaction once we build this project, and it still cash flows, we're still moving forward with multifamily. At the end of the day, multifamily is a long game. And so if we can build an apartment and then secure it with great long-term low interest rate debt, we can secure it for 10 years. So if we get a 10-year fixed at 3.875% on a $4 million apartment, I'm going to do that all day.
Yeah, I mean, that why would you not, right? I mean, worst case, you sit on it.
So. Exactly. Yeah, worst case, you hold it. And I think you hear everybody who's really talented in this business or had success, and I haven't looked up the exact figures, but I'm sure other people have, and they always say that if you look at any 10-year period, real estate hasn't been down in the major markets. And I did look at that in like Seattle during the housing crash. I tried to time it so it would be like the worst possible 10-year stretch. And sure enough, it was like, even or better. And so I truly believe that's the case. And then the other thing that I know from being a mortgage guy is if I'm securing that, $4 million on a 10-year fix, that's a 30-year amortization, my renters, my tenants who I love because they fund my awesomeness, are going to pay down a significant amount of that debt. So even if the market's the exact same, I've still gained a lot of money over that 10-year period, not just from cash flow, but from principal pay down, depreciation, et cetera.
Yeah, that's a good point too, because principal pay down is an obvious one. Depreciation is essentially more money you keep at the end of any given year via, essentially a ghost deduction on your tax return.
Exactly. And dude, I mean, if you're building houses, if you're doing real estate or mortgage as well as doing development, you have a lot of income typically anyway. And so you need those deductions to offset it. So I think we get anywhere around like negative, we get like a six-figure negative income from our apartment business. And, it's just the greatest thing I've ever had in my life.
Yeah. And then you spread that over and lay it on top of your positive income, and hopefully you neutralize a good chunk of it, right? So
Exactly. So that's another reason why multifamily is a good thing to get in. If you are building already, doing some sort of multifamily, even if it were a small scale, like you're mentioning, like 4 units to 6 units, is a really good idea. And I would even make the recommendation, just from the standpoint of somebody who does it, that if I were going to do small scale multifamily development, which is something we are looking into, I would try to keep it around 4 units or less. And the reason why is if you build a couple fourplexes, you can finance those with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac debt on very low interest, 30-year fixed, and you can sell those to regular consumers. Yep. Anyone on the street who's got a down payment, as little as 5% down on some of the Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac first-time homebuyer programs, they can buy that fourplex from you, and they're not going to be able to go out and buy a $2 million property, but they very well might be able to buy a $1.2 million fourplex, and they're going to be really excited to do that. There's only so many guys that have $500 to $1 million to buy your 20 to 40 unit building.
Yeah, I don't know if you have been tracking it, but we just passed, now that our Senate decided to meet again after our shenanigans this past week, they did pass a bill, House Bill 2020, that basically said that duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes could be allowed on any lot anywhere in the state of Oregon. Now, of course, there's some red tape that's got to get worked through, and each city has until the end of 2020 to kind of submit their own revised code that sort of dictates how that's going to play out. but they're allowing for small multi to be built in a lot of places that it wasn't previously. And I think Portland will probably be the most willing to just let that be. There'll be some of the suburb areas like Lake Oswego and whatnot. They'll socially engineer that away, but there'll be a lot more opportunity to build those small plexes like you're talking about.
Yeah, and that is just a fabulous thing. Like what I would instantly do, one play for the guys who don't want to do the full development in the flipping game, is I would instantly look for any property that was 4,000 square feet or close to, and I would just convert those all into fourplexes. That's going to be a very cheap way to get into the space. Alternatively, yeah, doing fourplexes just all along all those neighborhood commercial cores. So
how are you talking about 4,000 existing square footage of the house or the lots?
Yeah, the house. Like if you had like some of those big houses down, those old Craftsman down there are like 3,000 to 4,000 square feet. Mm-hmm. And if there's any ability to maybe do some sort of add-on or bump out and then kind of get four 2 bed, 1 bath, or 4 units in there. That's going to be a easy way to do it, right? Because it's going to be easier permit process is my guess. At least it would be in Seattle. It'd be easier to do a remodel permit than a new construction.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot quicker. So you could really, even if you're not going to get the exact same rent as you would from a new construction product, I mean, you're going to make a pretty nice looking building. And your goal is to get them remodeled, rented, and refinanced as quick as possible, and then simply repeat. So it's basically the BRRRR strategy, except for, just doing a lot of fourplex conversions. And the other thing I would say is, when we look at multifamily, we really want to look for how people are living nowadays. And, like I drive through Seattle and I hate it. I want nothing to do with a car. I drive down to Portland and I get stuck on those bridges and I'm just like, I don't know how people live here. And I realize that, everybody is kind of moving that way, and we have more and more people moving here. So I truly believe that people do want to, if they're going to rent, they want to live right by their neighborhood commercial cores. So, just naming a couple streets I know down there, like if you're like off of like Hawthorne, right, where you got all the bars and restaurants there, I want to make sure that I build fourplexes all around that neighborhood so people can just, use that street as their amenity space to your building. And maybe you don't need parking for everybody if you can get away with it with the permitting and the zoning, because those people are happy to just walk down the street to their favorite bar, and that will help you increase rent and sell your units.
Yeah, there's a fair bit of development that's gone on pre this bill that just got pushed through, where they actually don't require parking for a lot of these even fairly sizable buildings with maybe like 10, 12 units. They weren't requiring parking of any sort. So I know it pissed off the neighborhood folk, but it made it much more feasible for the developers. So I've seen a number of those go in around here as well.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, we're one of those no parking developers. And the problem with parking is a lot of the lots that are, inner city infill they're not even big enough to put parking, right? So if you have parking, you have to have 22 feet to back up. So even if you're doing like a 4,000 square foot lot, I mean, you might be able to get 2-3 cars of parking on it. And then in order to do that, you're, excavating, trying to make it work. It's not feasible. And, what we've seen is, we have 0 parking spots at our 20 unit building we built in in Green Lake. And, we had, 4 people that kind of figured out how to park there. And, about 50% of the building doesn't even have a car.
That's crazy.
It's not that big of a deal. And I think as we move forward, more and more people will move towards rideshare, more and more people will move towards Uber, more and more people will move towards, anything that doesn't have to do with vehicles, because it almost doesn't make sense in a lot of Seattle right now to have a car.
Yeah, and I think you're renting to people that are at a certain chapter in life where, they don't necessarily have kids and family and things like that either. So, it's not necessary.
Correct.
In fact, one of the guys that works in our office here does all of our direct mail. He doesn't have a car, hasn't for years, and he rides his skateboard to work every day. So there you go, right?
Yeah, there you go. You could say skateboard friendly.
Yeah, skateboard friendly employer I am.
Put a little ride rail out back.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So, all right. Well, I appreciate all the info here. I don't want to keep you too long. One last question I have for you is just on cost, because I know what we're coming in at approximately for new construction costs on the single family side, but what are you guys looking at just ballpark for costs on single family up there and then also on multifamily per foot?
Yeah. So I'll just give it with a quick caveat that it's all relative to what you build, yada, yada.
Yeah.
Yada.
Oh, of course. The plan, the lot, it all. I mean, this is just a generic giant catch-all.
Our all-in catch-all outside of land acquisition for house, high-end house with lots of custom finish, is approximately 190 a square foot. That does include finance charges, et cetera. So it's everything net of land. On the multifamily side, it's much closer to 225 net of land. And again, that includes all of your permitting, holding costs, financing costs, et cetera. So I'd say about a $35 per square foot difference between single family and I'll call it mid-size multifamily.
Yeah, and the reason why I want to ask that question is because most people think it's going to be the other way around. But with a lot of the stuff that you just mentioned about alarms, sprinklers, stairs, things like that, those costs just go up.
Well, and a lot of times, like, when I build a beautiful, $2 million house, like it only has one, well, maybe it has two kitchens, right? But like usually just one kitchen,
Yep.
3 bathrooms, and it's, 3,000 square feet, but a 3,000 square foot apartment could have 4 kitchens, 4 bathrooms, there's much more walls being framed, much more electrical outlets, right? And it just, the cost, there's more windows. So the cost is much higher. There's just more stuffed into smaller space.
Yep, more cabinets, more countertops, more sinks, all that stuff. So but yeah, people just they're under the, I think, illusion that it's significantly cheaper, but for those reasons, it's often not. So our cost per square foot on the single family side is approximately what yours is, a little bit cheaper maybe. But we have to build, again, more square footage to buy for 5 and sell for 1.5. We got to build 4,000 square feet, not 2,200 square feet. So, it's a little bit more there. It compresses our margins slightly because of it. Plus, we've got some guys here. I don't know if you guys do that. I mean, I'm sure you do. Seattle's fairly competitive, but we have some guys that have started to mimic what we've done for a while in the infill space, but they've done it on we'll call it a conveyor belt builder level. So like they were production builders that got into the infill game. And so they're just buying virtually anything anywhere and building it instead of building subdivisions. So that's driven up the cost of land substantially.
Yeah, we're seeing that a lot outside the Seattle market where there's a little bit bigger lot because they can kind of put their houses on it. And that, they're making a killing though, because the one thing I've learned about building nice luxury houses is in Seattle, people care. Outside of Seattle, people just want a 3,000 square foot house.
That's a good business model to run by then.
Yeah. So we're definitely expanding into new markets and really looking at it. And just everything comes down to it. If it's a deal, it's a deal. You should buy it. If it's not a deal, don't try to make it one.
Gotcha. So in summary here, before I cut you loose, you're looking at multifamily stuff, maybe smaller multifamily, but you're looking at it with kind of a close eye, we'll call it, right? Because it's such a long-term time. The single-family world, you're going anything that's a deal, you're building it out. Is that safe to say at this point?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So just really quickly, just pencil and paper. So like, what we look for is we want to make sure that on the multifamily side that we're building where our finished value gives us a 35% equity position. So we want to have about 35% margin at the end of the day. We want to make sure that we have 25% it's called 1.25 DSCR, debt service coverage ratio. That means that the rent covers all of the expenses and there's still 25% more left over in cash flow. And we want to make sure that we're able to pull 100% of our cash out of that project when we're done. If we can meet those 3 items, being conservative, we are pulling the trigger.
That would be those would be winter projects. Now, the only thing I didn't touch on, and I'll save it for another time, is you got to have the right lenders, though, which we talked about offline. So that's a big piece of this game.
Yeah, the capital requirements are just so intense. Like, a lot of people are probably sitting here like, oh, this guy's doing a bunch of multifamily projects. He must be a multi-millionaire. Well, it's just not the case. Like, it's just how we structure the debt and then how we stagger our apartment projects allows us to reutilize that same, $500 to $1 million of capital and do multiple projects. And that's why we're so focused on being able to get our cash back. Because when we finish this 30 unit project, for example, we'll be able to pull, $600,000 back out and start the next project. So we don't need to go raise another 600 grand of capital. We don't need to sell a building to get another 600 grand of capital. We already have it. And then we just do that new project. So it is very capital intensive. So you really have to do a little bit more planning than with just the building the house game.
So last question. I'm assuming you like debt more than syndicating.
Oh, yeah, man. I mean, debt is relatively cheap. If you got a clean balance sheet and you got a little bit of capital, that would be the way to do it. How I did my entire business was I built single family homes. I sold those, which generated capital. On that same time, I kept my W-2 job so I could, make my own money that I could use as capital. And I combined those two sources to build multifamily projects, which has generated me lots of wealth. And I have not had to share it with anybody except for my partner.
Which is the best way, unless of course you didn't have a partner. But a lot of time in multifamily space, a lot of times you need them. So,
yeah, I mean, even in the single family, it's just like it's so much easier just to have people know their dedicated tasks and then just set them all to it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're also running, top 5 loan production businesses in the country too, right? At the same time, so it makes it a little challenging to do everything.
It does. It's fun though. I like it. I like having all the different businesses.
Very cool. Well, how now that we've kind of run the gamut here on talking about all this stuff, what's the best way for people that are listening? Because I know they're going to enjoy the show a lot. What's the best way for them to connect with you and kind of see what you got going on? And then, of course, if they're in the Seattle market or wherever in Washington, they need lending done. Maybe that's what you could give them a way to contact you for that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So just really quick, if you follow me on Facebook or Instagram, my name is Augustus Bukowski. Pretty easy to find on there. Very Googleable. My lending website for residential mortgage, that's going to be anything from 1 to 4 unit. We can also help you acquire development properties that have an existing structure. You can just put seattlemortgagelender.com, decent URL. And
that's a good one. Did you have to pay for that, or was that an early adoption?
It was available. So I mean,
wow.
You just look, you'll find. So so you just Google me, look me up. I'm happy to talk to you about your projects. If you have something interesting that you think is a killer deal, I'm always interested in reviewing stuff for sale, also opportunities, and I'll even help you. A lot of people will use me just to help them value some multifamily development dirt.
Very cool. Well, I might use you for that. So, well, hey, man, I appreciate you taking time out of your day. I know you're a busy guy. You got a lot going on, but I know folks are really going to dig this episode. And selfishly, I'm stoked that you were able to carve off some time and join me here.
No worries, man. Anytime.
All right, what'd you guys think of this week's show, huh? Pretty good interview with Augie. One of my favorites, to be honest with you. Reason being is because selfishly, I want us to get into the multifamily space more than we are at the moment. And I was able to talk through kind of the nitty gritty stuff, the stuff that at some point, if you guys are on your journey, you'll want to know. So you can listen to this episode over and over again once you kind of get a little further along, or maybe you're there. But talking numbers, talking difficulties, talking challenges, talking differences between single family and multifamily, building ground up, timelines, all that stuff. So again, I want to thank Augie for being so sharing and letting us know, everything that he's experienced to this point in his career, and more importantly, everything that he's got going on. And hopefully you guys learned a lot from it. I know that I did as well. Now, before I leave you, as always, I want to leave you with a closing success quote. And this week's quote, I don't really know who said it, but it's a great quote. And it ties in very nicely to the theme of this week's show, which is, doing big things. So this week's closing success quote is, go big or go home. I like that one. It's kind of how I live my life. Hopefully you guys do too. All right, folks, I will see you all next week.